All right. Welcome to the Tuesday, September 15th, 2020 electronic meeting of the Ann Arbor Parks Advisory Commission. This meeting is in accordance with executive orders from the governor to effect social distancing and mitigate the spread of the COVID-19 virus. We intend to conduct this meeting similarly to an in-person meeting. However, please be patient if there are technical issues. And I'll say this is our third in-person meeting, so got it right so far, but bear with us. Public comment will be via telephone only. To speak during any of the public comment periods, please call 1-888-788-0099 and enter meeting ID 955-3005-9103. This information is also available on the published agenda in the public notices section of the city website and on the broadcast of this meeting on CTN Channel 16, AT&T Channel 99, and online at www.a2gov.org/watchctn. So Colin, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Morrison?
Here.
Commissioner London?
Here.
Commissioner Apple? Commissioner Apple? Yeah, is here.
Here.
Commissioner Ramaswamy?
Here.
Commissioner Skiles?
Here.
Commissioner Bordsdorf?
Here.
Commissioner Marson?
Here.
And Commissioner Kraut. Councilmember Hayner?
Here.
Councilmember Grand.
Oh, here.
You have a quorum.
Great. Thank you, Colin, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Moving on to approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any desires to change anything with the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to approval of the minutes. Attached in your packet are minutes from our August 3rd, 2020 PAC meeting. Are there any corrections or additions or a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion by Lauren, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Anne, thank you. All in favor of approving the August 3rd minutes, please raise your hand or say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, thank you. Minutes are approved. Moving on to presentations. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I missed our public comment. So sorry about that. Going back to our first public comment section. Sorry about that. Public comment is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about any parks-related item. To comment, please state your name and address for the record. Public comment will be made by phone at the number I mentioned before, which appears on the published agenda and is displayed on the meeting's video feed. If you are interested in speaking at this time, please call the meeting with the information provided. City staff, and we have Kristen with us today, will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand to speak, please press *9 on your phone. You will hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. So Kristen, do we have any public comments at this time?
Yes, I'm also going to read another number to call in.
Okay.
Callers can call in using the number that Paige read earlier, or by calling 213-338-8477. And then we have a few callers. Caller ending in 126, you will have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Ben Ratner, and I grew up in the Angel neighborhood right near Gallup Park and the Arboretum. I'm happy to be speaking with you today. From April 11th to July 3rd of this year, Maya Goldman and I visited each of Ann Arbor's 148 public parks. We started at Hanover Square and nearly 3 months later finished our journey in Arboretum Nature Area. Each of the 148 parks we visited had a slightly different personality. There were hidden gems like Iroquois Park and Postman's Rest Park. There were Ann Arbor staples like Gallup Park and Wheeler Park. And there were some parks so charming like Mushroom Park that we honestly couldn't help but smile. What was so lovely about this is that we discovered parts of Ann Arbor that were always there, but that we had never seen. And we gained a new appreciation for the way parks can bring communities together and help them grow strong. After reflecting on our voyage, we released a report with our field notes, rankings, commendations, recommendations, and more entitled From Burns to Belize, a report on Ann Arbor's public parks. We have shared this report with the Commission, and we're happy to provide it to any member of the public. There are two recommendations in particular that I wanted to share today. First, that the Parks Advisory Commission and the Parks Department pursue a plan for clear signage at every park so that it's consistent with the address listed on the park website. We're not the first ones who have encountered this problem, and we believe it's an important step for making the parks accessible. For instance, many of the parks we visited did not have a clearly visible Parks Department sign with the name of the park, and the addresses listed online did not always bring us to an access point of the park. So we recommend that the Parks Department list addresses for each park that are close to a clear and usable access point, preferably one with parking and a sign nearby. We also wanted to bring up another recommendation that the city conduct an equity audit of the park system. We're really proud to live in a city where park coverage is actually fairly even throughout Ann Arbor, but there are some indications that park inequities exist. For instance, the average neighborhood income of our admittedly subjective top 25 parks was nearly 40% higher than the citywide average. And of our top 25, only one, number 20, is in one of Ann Arbor's most Black neighborhoods. Though this is hardly scientific, these findings raise an important question. Are quality, accessible parks available to all Ann Arborites, regardless of their race or class? We don't have the specifics of the audit thought of, but we think that at minimum it should A, review whether disparities in park quality or accessibility exist along race and class lines, and B, establish a clear equity framework that informs future decision-making by the city, such as placement of additional parks and maintenance of current parks. We believe this is necessary to ensure that Ann Arbor lives up to our value of inclusivity into the future. Thank you so much for your time, and I welcome your comments.
Ben, thank you for calling in today. We appreciate it.
All right, caller ending in 844, you will have 3 minutes to speak.
Can you hear me fine?
Yes, you can.
All right. My name is Nora. I live in the Dickon Elementary School neighborhood that's off of Stadium, and I'm going to be speaking about the Food Forest Coalition that's happening in Arrowwood. I would just love to voice my support for it, being a community student and just a person living in Ann Arbor, just because of how wonderful an idea it is. I really appreciate the drive for the educational aspect of it, where you're actually physically getting in the work of like working with the land and learning the names of all the plants that are being planted, and as well as it being accessible to the public just in regards to harvest and any food that you may need. But that added aspect of physically learning about the land, especially during these current times with COVID and stay at home and everything like that, it is, I know as a student, like being online with the start of school, this idea of, oh my gosh, I get to actually engage with the land and I get to work outside in a safe space that, for both health reasons and just in general, is super exciting to me. And I just wanted to voice my support for the project.
Great, Nora, thank you for calling in today.
Of course.
All right. right, caller ending in 218, you will have 3 minutes to speak.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yes, I hope so. Yay! All right. My name is Pam. I am a resident of Arrowwood, and I thank you for the opportunity to address the Advisory Commission today. I'm calling about agenda item 6A, which is the Food Forest Project. In the midst of COVID lockdown, we walked into Leslie Park to find it suddenly taken over. We are the household that alerted the city in spring, and we didn't do it out of curiosity, we did it out of concern. When we asked Scott Spooner why the city wasn't enforcing its code and having these citizens restore the damage to the park, he said he did not know. After that, communication broke down, and after a pro forma meeting last week, the city seems poised to allow this taking to stand. Before you hear about this project, you should be fully aware that it started with a clear violation of city code, that people who live near and use that space daily have been excluded or dismissed from the process, and that the city's failure to enforce its code has resulted in an utter lack of trust among citizens who live on the park and use the park. It is leading to rising tensions and conflict in our neighborhood. We have little trust in the city and no trust in the group that is running this project. While it is community facing, it is a private endeavor administered by and ultimately benefiting a private business. This group misrepresented prior use of the site, an area often used in the park, and misrepresented its outreach. I am troubled that they said that they secured community support prior to beginning work. They did not. Arrowwood Hills was unaware of this project. The group never reached out to neighbors. They knew they did not have permission to proceed, but did so anyway during a public health emergency when city oversight was challenged. I have listed these and other concerns in an email to the Parks Commission. Normally, this is the kind of project that I would enthusiastically support, but this backwards process has left a bad taste and set a dangerous precedent. No matter how worthy or well-intentioned we may think a project is, this lack of due process is harmful. Allowing this to go forward says our rules don't matter. It says that taking the law into your own hands is okay. What is to stop the next person from appropriating land for their own use? From the beginning, this project was uncivic, undemocratic, and unneighborly, and the city has doubled down on its failure to recognize that this is harmful to people. Please do not allow this to go forward. We need to start again from scratch with a site that has been properly selected and will be accessible to all, and a fair process that respects the codes we live by. Thank you for hearing my comment on this matter.
Pam, thank you for calling in today and for your email as well.
Thank you.
Do we have any other public comments at this time, Kristen?
No, no other callers have indicated.
Okay, thank you. And again, thank you to everyone who has called in today. There will be another opportunity for public comment at the end of our meeting as well. Moving on to item 6, presentations. Our first presentation is on the proposed Leslie Food Garden project, which we just heard about from a couple of our public commenters. So I'd like to invite Scott Spooner to give us more information.
I feel like I might be rehashing just a little bit, but yeah, I'm here to introduce the presenters on the food forest at Leslie Park. I'm going to share my screen now. So here is the northwest section of Ann Arbor, and outlined in red is Leslie Park right here. Here's the Leslie Park Golf Course. This is the Leslie Science and Nature Center. We have Black Pond Woods, this Pontiac Trail, and Duvarin, and Nixon Roads, and Plymouth here. You have to access Leslie Park through this subdivision off of Duvarin or through this co-op right here, Arrowwood. And this is a Google map of the section of Leslie Park that we're going to be talking about. So this is Arrowwood, the left, You can see, whoop, that's not what I want to do. Up toward the top is where the pickleball courts are that were just redone. We have basketball courts, a soccer field. There's a play structure down here. The food forest is currently in this red box down here at the south end of the park. Oh, how do I, yeah, there we go. Sorry. So in May, the customer service line for parks received a question about the work going on in Leslie Park, as one of the callers alluded to. Since we were operating under the stay-at-home order at that time, we had not noticed anything unusual going on at Leslie Park. When staff went out to the park, they noticed an area that had been planted with a variety of plants. After some investigation, we were able to contact Shanasi Rose, who was leading a group of neighbors of the park in what she called a food forest. She had contacted a council member about this idea of a community food garden, and after some discussion, it was agreed that it would be a good idea and would meet a lot of the city of Ann Arbor's sustainability goals. While the concept was good, the group of neighbors took this conversation as tacit approval of the project without notifying anybody in the Parks Department what they were planning, and they went ahead and started the project. Once staff learned about this project, we were able to contact Shanasi, and we asked them to pause any further work on the project, which they did. This posed a small problem, as the project, as proposed, seemed like it had a lot of merit. What we needed to see was a plan for the planting and especially maintenance of the project food forest once it was started. If they had come to us in the beginning, these are things we would have asked to see, and it seemed overly punitive to remove all of the work that they had done if we were ultimately going to approve this project, which did have a lot of merit, like I said. It seemed like at that point, pausing the project seemed like a good idea. We were able to see the proposal fleshed out, and we began setting up a public meeting. The city held this meeting on Zoom on September 10th, and was publicized on the city website. Residents within a quarter mile of Leslie Park were also mailed a postcard with all the details of the public meeting and how to join. At the meeting, there were 36 participants. Myself and Heather Seafarth were organizers and hosts of the meeting. There were also 2 other city staff members there to monitor the meeting. Of the remaining 30 participants, about half made statements or asked questions after the presentation. Of these, about a dozen were solidly in support of the project, 3 were solidly against, and 1 saw both good and bad points, and I considered to be neutral. Once again, this project is a grassroots project, imagined and to this point totally funded by residents. After this presentation, I think PAC will have to decide what should be done, if it should be allowed to move forward or not. And I think Colin.
Yeah, Scott, thank you. Colin, did you have more to add?
Yeah. Yep. If I could just clarify. So
your hand raised, Jeff. I just want to let Scott finish presenting first. So Colin, go right ahead.
Yeah. So just to clarify a little bit, for today, what is really being asked of PAC is to hear about the project and to consider comments and to ask questions. There's no action today that's actually required of PAC. Our thought would be that you have the opportunity to ask questions and to learn about the project. We would come back in October and at that time consider a resolution to either move ahead in an amended way, or not actually move ahead at all. There's a reason that it is on the agenda as a proposed project, because we're still really basically working out how to move ahead on this. So no action today.
Okay, Colin, thank you for that clarification. That's helpful. And And I think we have a couple other presenters with us, but Jeff, I know you have your hand raised. Did you have a question before we move forward?
Well, just briefly, I just wanted to interject in this timeline that, I met the, I guess you'd call it a petitioner. It's not really planning commission here, but I met I'm Ward 1 rep for that area. And so I was asked to come out here and come out to the park and hear about this idea. And I met Miss Rose out there, and she pitched the idea to me. And it's not really, it doesn't really matter for this conversation if I felt it was a good idea or not, but it does meet a lot of our city goals. But I called Colin right away and I said, hey, this woman pitched this idea to me. I think it's an okay idea. And then I think it was, that was like on a Monday or Tuesday. And then Saturday, he sent me some pictures. Something had happened in the interim between the time when I spoke with them on the start of the week and that weekend. This whole thing had transpired. And so I don't want that some of these emails that came across today made the suggestion that somehow I was conspiring to slip this in under the radar and it was some kind of pet project of mine. And none of that is so. My responsibility in this matter was to connect the people who are interested in this project with the city to get them involved in this process. And that's where it stands now. The city is fully in charge of this process. And from what I understand, nothing's really happened on it because we've asked them to stop working on it, and probably rightly so. But I don't want anybody to get the impression that somehow my tacit approval was given for this. I do think it's a good idea aside from that, but and I did express that to the planners of this, but I certainly don't have the authority to say, go ahead and do whatever it is you're going to do out there. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. I mean, Colin, you can address that or not, but I'm pretty sure we spoke before a shovel went in the ground.
Yeah, I certainly spoke to Councilmember Hayner, called and asked me about a potential project, which I said, it sounds on the surface, it sounds as if there's a lot of goals in the sustainability framework that this would meet. It could be a really good idea, but in order to move ahead, we would need to get a lot more information, understand how it's going to be maintained. We would need to talk about community engagement to see if this is how that area of the park is, if the use would actually be embraced by the residents that actually use the park most. So, obviously it did not happen. And that's why I think what we have now is a question of, is this a good project? But we need to consider that within the context of, unfortunately, the process, which should have been followed, was not. And we need to move on from that and see if we can understand the merits of it as we move ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Colin. Steve, did you have a question?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. I'm recalling we had a public comment maybe 2 or 3 months ago. We were in person, and I believe we were, maybe the timeline is wrong, but I believe there was a topic about maybe paving a pickleball courts type of topic, and a resident in public comment in Arrowwood, I believe, brought up a topic it's just ringing a bell, that someone was saying, hey, there's these plantings going on, adjacent to Arrowwood. And I don't know if that's the same topic or not, but the feedback at the time that we gave as a commission was go ahead and contact city staff about that complaint. I don't know if anything came of that, or if that's mixing two separate issues, but I'm just recalling that this may have bubbled up to the surface with us at least once before.
All right. You have a good memory, Steve. Scott, do we have more information to be presented today?
Yes.
So in our looks like we have a couple guests here to present.
Yes.
Yeah.
Shinasi and Robin are here to do the presenting on what they have for the plan.
Okay, great. Then I'll turn it over to you, Robin and Shinasi, and then we'll let more questions come in after that.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for your time today. We do have a slideshow and a short presentation on this, so I am going to go ahead and share my screen so we can get started. So like I said, I'm Robin Greenwood, and Shanasi Rose and I are here to present on the Northside Food Forest Community Resilience Project. We're really grateful for your time today, and I'm grateful to be able to be here and talk to you about this.
I'm Shanasi, and just to start with this overview, one of the things that is really exciting to us as we started to do our research and due diligence about where Ann Arbor is at with regard to sustainability initiatives, we learned a lot about Ann Arbor sort of re-upping its sustainability initiatives and clarifying these framework goals, and also really laser focusing on climate action and response. And we learned that this project that we are proposing meets 9 of the 16 sustainability goals. And it feels like a really important thing that we're keeping this in mind as we look at the project. That really is a big part of what motivates it and what constitutes our hope for the project. So with that, I want to take a second to introduce who is behind this project. It is a citizen-driven, resident-driven initiative that is made up of a wide range of people of cultural backgrounds, racial backgrounds, ages, skill sets, people who have been generously and consistently donating their time and energy and expertise to this project and have a tremendous amount of enthusiasm and commitment. And to kind of clear this up, I appreciate that it's just on the table right from the start. Robin and I are serving as liaisons for this coalition. And, when there's about 20 people in the core group coalition and then a lot more public positive response that we've had, we feel like it simplifies the process to have a couple of people who are point people. And while the people who you see, some of these folks in this image here, bring a range of skills, organic farming, engineering, ecology, and place or program development, our skill set is the design portion and also the community organizing. So I've lived in Arrowwood for 33 years. My house backs up to Leslie Park here. And it's true that I reached out to Council Member Hayner, who I really didn't know before this, and kind of proposed this project. And it's true that he came back to me with an email that said he put feelers out and there seems to be enthusiasm in the city for the project. What we have not had experience with until this time is public process like this. Like Robin and I have helped oversee and implement designs in private places many times, but this has been a very steep learning curve for us. And the minute that we learned that the way that we were proceeding was not in accordance with process, we stopped, and that was many months ago now, and hundreds of more hours have been put in on a volunteer basis to meet any of the requests that have been laid before us. When we're talking about enthusiasm in Arrowwood, I'm sure that you must know by now, at least as far as we know and have heard, there are only 3 voices who are coming forward that are not excited about the project. And we have had many, many more voices that are excited about the project. And the last thing that I will say with regard to sort of introducing the public engagement part is that when public signage went up on the proposed site in order to let people know about the meeting, we did put a QR code there that allowed people to go and fill out a public survey, which we offered city access to should they want it. And we've had 55 replies to that. Only a handful of those replies are people that we know, and all except one of them have been extremely positive and wanting to actually collaborate and engage in the project. So the 3 goals that we're most excited about the project shining in are localizing food, implementing these sustainable or regenerative systems, and strengthening community engagement or resilience. And this is one of the things that we hope we can really drive home with you. You know, this concept of regenerative agriculture and public food forest in particular is something that's happening all over the country. And it really is like booming and happening all over the country as a response to the need for climate response, ecological regeneration, and also food security resilience. You know, this is a small site that we are asking for the support on. So it isn't going to feed the masses, but it's a profound opportunity to demonstrate these principles and the feasibility of them.
And in that vein, we want to touch just for a moment on some of the very real problems that this kind of regenerative, sustainable system can help solve. And these are issues, you know, habitat loss, desertification, climate disruption, waste and food insecurity. They're issues that are addressed in real time at the site itself through building beautiful soil and being a carbon negative food source. So it reduces the carbon footprint of the area, providing free food to residents in the area. But more importantly, and a huge part of the goal for us, is having it be a demonstration site and an education site. So this is a way that to demonstrate what is possible in terms of these sorts of sustainable solutions and sustainable systems, and inspire and educate residents to be implementing these kinds of solutions in other places. And just a bit about food forests themselves. Food forests is a really ancient practice going back thousands of years, around also called forest gardens or edible forests. And it's a way of layering in vertical space and having integrated perennial plants that become self-regulating, much like a forest. And in practical terms, in terms of a park project, it means that there's a lot of work up front, but because it's self-regulating, it requires much less maintenance than something like an annual garden planting would. And so this is a map, much like what Scott showed, just giving a sense of where the food forest sits in Leslie Park. You know, here we have Arrowwood Hills, and here's the Leslie Golf Course. And the site is right here, and it sits on 1/5 of an acre. And we've been working, as they mentioned, since we realized our error, stopped work, and have been talking with city staff. We've been collaborating on the design to make sure that it does not interfere with park maintenance around the food forest. And again, here is a close-up of the design of the food forest. We have areas with food forest guilds and those integrated plantings, an herb spiral here. This is an area for community engagement and a children's garden. And we're happy to answer any more questions about the design should they come up.
So again, you know, here are some sites of, we had 3 work weekends before we knew that we weren't supposed to be doing that. And one of the things that has been really amazing about this is that even during such a stressful time as this global pandemic, people have been able to come forward and collaborate on something in a physically safe way, respecting the COVID, you know, boundaries and guidelines, and actually feel hopeful, like being able to plug into something that is hopeful and proactive and helping Ann Arbor, ideally, you know, not just be on the map for these sorts of resilience projects, but actually be among the leadership in the country around these resilience projects.
And so, like Scott mentioned, maintenance for this sort of project is a real question going forward. And it really comes down to well-organized community engagement. Through the design, there are ways that it requires less engagement and is self-regulating. But through harvest days that are we organized, and through having clear roles for volunteers who are interested. And like we've said, there's been a lot of interest, a lot of community engagement for people who are both in support of the project and wanting to be able to engage with it as an educational experience. And this is, like Shanasi said, where we have experience in terms of this kind of community engagement and organizing that kind of volunteer base.
So the last thing that I want to say is that, you know, we've been in communication now with the sustainability department, and obviously ongoing with Scott and the parks. And to our knowledge, this is the first sustainability initiative that is being advanced in Ann Arbor in a public way, citizen-driven, volunteer-driven, that has anything to do with advancing the localization of food. And we feel like that's a really important part of the sustainability goals. And there are a lot of qualified, motivated people who are being very generous about this project. So we have a lot of faith in it as a legacy project. We're watching kids and elders be excited about and impacted by what this can offer for generations to come. And obviously we hope for your support. So thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you both for joining us today and providing all of that information. Are there any questions from any PAC members at this time? Steve? Yes.
What would happen with the food, the resulting food from the food forest?
Well, the nature of the way that the public food forests are happening across the country is that it's open for harvest as it is ripening and people are moving through. That has already been true with the very small beds that we established. And then our plan would be to have at least a couple of harvest days where people would come out as part of the community engagement and education part and distribute at those times. So.
And wanting to engage the community so that people who may not want to do the harvest but are interested in getting food from the area are able to come forward and say that and get food that way.
Yeah, we've already had, like, one of the questions that we put in our public survey is we requested people who could help us translate the signage into Mandarin and Spanish, because we have a significant population of those people in this immediate area, at least in Arrowwood. And we had a couple of volunteers come forward who want to help us with that.
Steve, did you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up a little bit to make sure, like, why was that particular spot chosen? And I guess, and if there was any like work done behind, I don't know, any soil sampling, any other testing or checking of that site prior to that being selected?
Yeah, so I live on this park and have lived on this park for 33 years and walk it regularly and am familiar with the public use of the park. We're thinking of this hopefully as a pilot project, like a way that we could demonstrate a citizen-driven, really good example of a project of this nature. And it's a very small and manageable area that feels important. Also, the fact that a food resilience or security project is sited next to one of the only affordable living co-ops or communities in the city feels like a good measure that's happening here. And really, truly, it's out of the way. Like, you know, there's a playground right in the larger area. The soccer happens when we're able to be doing that. And this is, you know, a small area that is out of the way. And we did do basic soil viability testing in terms of the composition of the soil, but it hasn't been an in-depth lab test. So, you know, the soil looks like it needs amending at this point, and that's part of the project.
Because I don't, Paige, I don't want to go out of order, but just to give my initial reactions to it, I mean, it sounds like a cool project. The issue is that, as you pointed out at the beginning, the process, right? I mean, these are public parks. A lot of people have great ideas, but if someone, you know, a group of neighbors goes out and starts digging a swimming pool back there, a group of neighbors goes out and starts putting in a beach volleyball court back there, maybe it doesn't tick off as many of the sustainability goals, but I bet you can get 3 or 4 sustainability goals by putting in a beach volleyball court there. It's a great idea, but it's not necessarily your decision to take to start putting it into process. And so some of the thoughts that are coming to my mind are, we're getting back to the site. Is this the right place? I mean, we have over 150 parks in the city. If we want to showcase this, if this is the right idea, it sounds really cool. Is this the right spot? Is this the right, you know, those are the kind of questions that are bubbling up to my mind right away. But I really appreciate the information. I really appreciate the enthusiasm in getting this moving in the first place. And so I admire that. My issue is just as a commissioner, we've got to be sensitive to the process and make sure that we're getting all the right input before a decision like this is taken.
Yeah.
Sure. And speaking, go ahead.
That it means a lot to us. And I hope that we have made ourselves clear that that was not malintended, and that the moment that that came to our attention, we have corrected our course and have been absolutely cooperative with anything and everything that the city has asked of us. And that this, you know, is a group of Ann Arbor residents who are engaged in the process. And you know, answering the question about like, could it be other places? I mean, the hope is that projects of this nature could happen many places. A lot of the people who are engaged in and interested in this project, not exclusively, but a lot of them are in Ward 1 and particularly in Arrowwood or close to it and would want to work near a park that they have a relationship with. So.
Yeah, and just wanted to like thank you for that and say like, yeah, this piece around how we got started was absolutely our error in understanding the process. As Shanasi said, it has been, you know, we have a lot of experience with the community organizing part. This part is a steep learning curve. We absolutely misunderstood and made a mistake in terms of how we got started and are genuinely sorry for getting off on that wrong foot. And really grateful for this opportunity to have this extended communication with the park staff and now with the Parks Advisory Commission to talk about these issues.
I see a few other hands raised. I saw Pravina's hand first. So Pravina, I'm gonna let you go. And then Ruth and Ann, I do see you guys next. So
thank you. I'm in the Michigan Theater, so sorry for my mask. I have two questions. One is for Robin or the group that's presenting. My question is, how are you being funded, or is it coming from community contributions? And then my second question is actually back to staff. Maybe Colin can answer. I know recently when I went to West Park, there was a community garden next to the parking lot, next to the basketball courts. Is that part of a separate organization or nonprofit, or is that part of the city? And I'm trying to understand at that community garden being on city property, how that worked. And thanks.
So in terms of how this project has been funded so far, it has been all donations on the part of the people who are in the coalition and other community members who are excited about the project. Money, time, energy, all of that, and a lot of effort has gone into it. We are looking to and prepared to apply for the Sustainability Ann Arbor, Sustaining Ann Arbor Together grant through the Sustainability Department, which we have been advised to do because, as we said, unlike most projects, this project ticks off 9 out of 16 of those goals. And it is not affiliated with Project Grow, which most community gardens are.
Yeah, Colin, can you speak a little more to Project Grow or just the other gardens that are in city parks?
Yeah, so to part two of that question, the garden in West Park is operated by Project Grow in an agreement with the city. We have a handful of gardens across the city. There's West Park, Hunt Park, Burr Park, Leslie Science Nature Center. I think I'm missing something else, but
the north side is one.
So there is an agreement in place for how that space is used and how it's operated. And there's actually also a portion of that agreement with Project Grow that outlines kind of the steps for if there is interest in adding another community garden in a park, how do we determine if that's actually something that the community would like to see move ahead? So in some ways, we're backing into that part of it now.
Mm.
Thanks, Colin.
Yep.
Ruth.
Yeah, so I have one question for Robin and Shanasi, and then a couple of questions for Colin and Scott. So just like thinking ahead, I understand, you know, you have this cool idea and you're super enthusiastic about it. Just want to think ahead 3 or 5 years. Let's say all the people sort of move away. Mm-hmm. Like, what do you sort of foresee happening with that location?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that that's a great question, and that's a big part of what City has asked us to demonstrate in our plan. You know, we put together a very thorough proposal and have been back and forth for months now, sorting out these details. And when it comes to treating it as a legacy project, you know, this is, again, as Robin said, where our skill set around community organizing comes in. There is a tremendous amount of enthusiasm, gratefully on the part of also younger people who are just starting to raise their families in the area. And what feels really important about this is that there are clear terms on the use of the space. a very clear checklist of tasks that need to happen and manageable volunteer roles that can be handed off. And this is where I personally have 30 years background in community organizing and know that that is way more likely to ensure the ongoing success of the project. So I hope that answers your question.
Robin, did you
have more questions?
Yeah, and this is more to Colin and Scott. Just thinking about sort of Ben's question about equity when he spoke. And if this is a good model, if other people heard about this, people on the east side, people on the south side, whatever, and how we would kind of deal with that in terms of process, and maybe you already have heard people talking about it. And then, I guess sort of related, whether there has been any kind of, never mind, I'll save that for another time, but maybe you could just answer that first question.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can start to answer it. Depending on what exactly the garden looks like that another area of the city might be interested in, we probably would start by actually seeing if they wanted to work with Project Grow, since that's what they kind of do in other city parks. If it were something which falls outside of kind of the mission, for Project Grow, then we would take the approach that we do with the Project Grow gardens of trying to figure out if there's a suitable location. So, it would be at the very outset, it would be an idea would come to us. We'd say to Project Grow, is this something you are interested in and that you can take on if it's in a city park? If not, it would be an idea that we would look through, ask questions. We go out to the community to see if indeed the site is able to be used by that.
Thanks. So Robin and Shanasi, have you had any conversations with Project Grow?
One of the board members from Project Grow came to the public meeting last week, and he was super enthusiastic about the project. This is a very distinct project. It's not just, quote, a garden. It is a sustainability initiative in that it is a self-regulating agricultural installation, and he was excited to learn about it. So we exchanged contact information and we'll stay in touch about it.
And I also wanted to say in that vein, in the public survey that we had and people had access to on site, one of the major themes we saw is people having interest in more of these projects, people asking about how they had wanted to get a Project Grow garden in a certain site and weren't able to, or if there was a way to make this sort of project bigger or available in other parts of the city. And like Shanasi said, we are starting that connection with Project Grow to be able to, talk to them more about this model, learn more about their model, and go from there.
I mean, because one of my thoughts is just, I don't know how much interest in this kind of work is going to be long ranging and how much of it has really been provoked by the pandemic and people being at home more. I know the gardens in my neighborhood look much nicer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a good point. I will say that this trend of the public food forests across the country in cities predates the pandemic and goes back, 10 years. And you can see some of these projects that were started 5-10 years ago and how community engagement in some of these places has actually increased really through mindful and careful engagement with the community, asking what vegetables would you like to see grown? Are there fruits that you can't access here because they originate in a different part of the world that we can grow here? And that's where we have our training, is in those specific food forest permaculture models, and have been looking to that in terms of not only the design and how to keep the maintenance low, but in terms of those community engagement pieces.
Anne, did you have a question?
Yes, I have a small handful of questions actually. The very first one to Shanasi and Robin, have you registered a nonprofit organization to support this cause?
No.
Have you done any research into the previous use of this land, and are there any thoughts on just like the safety of the land, knowing that there have been issues in that neighborhood
Yeah.
and on other sites?
Well, I mean, Scott did, tell us about that this whole area at some point was part of Mr. Leslie's orchard. Now those trees, I've been here 33 years, and in this area we haven't had fruit trees in a very long time. The entire time that I have been here, but that down lower at the Leslie Science Center, that issue came up, which was exactly where that well, that, whatever it is, the dumping well was located. And so, like I said, we had tested here for basic viability, like composition of the soil, but we haven't done a lab analysis because we haven't done that. So,
and that being said, we do have, that's a very common problem in this sort of design, especially when you're looking at an urban food forest. And both because of the nature of the plants, where the woodier a plant is, the less you have a concern of the contaminants. And in the places where we're talking about raised beds, where we're creating our own soil and not necessarily planting into existing soil, we have a number of tools at our disposal to take whatever information we learn from a soil sample like that and be able to still grow food safely.
Okay. And then sort of along those lines, like as far as maintenance goes and like a water source for that site, like what's been the discussion around that?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that is challenging, particularly at the onset. So if you look at the design, 3/4 of it or more is cited for the Food Forest Guild. That does require, the trees that, are young, they require watering and attention much more so early on, but once that establishes, it's much less demanding. We have it proposed currently as a hybrid, and part of the space used for annual vegetables and community engagement. It seems like the community is excited about that. That's more labor intensive. It's designed in such a way where if that enthusiasm is not sustained, it can be transitioned to perennial plantings. And for now, what we have proposed in the design is a rainwater catchment system. And that's why we have one of the engineers on board, is helping us with those calculations and helping us assess what we would need and what we could do with that in order to make it work. And some of the people, I think maybe even our council, both of our council members, our current Ward 1 council members, are in support of this. And Lisa Dish, who I don't know, who's an incumbent, also found her way to the survey and is in support of the project. So talked about maybe accessing, a way to access city water or something from Arrowwood, but we feel like it would be optimal if we could demonstrate the sustainability and also minimize cost and do the rainwater catchment system.
Okay. And then just one final question, I think maybe more for Colin and Scott, which is on the west side here, I was familiar with, there was a memorial garden, I think it was, at like Veterans Memorial Park. That I feel like was recently downsized quite a bit. And I'm wondering sort of the history of that. Was that originally a community supported and maintained garden, or was that a city thing? And kind of what was the decision making to downsize that? And I know it's not food, but it's still a garden that I was aware of that changed over time.
Yeah, I think that you're referring to the garden kind of on the corner of Jackson and Maple, where there's now the flagpole.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So there was actually a project with the American Legion group to do a planting and to put in a flagpole there. We had a lot of kind of invasive overgrowth in the garden that was further away and sort of in the back there where the pine trees are and other things. So the idea came forward that there was a way to improve the flagpole area and to actually honor the park in the way that it should be for the veterans. So there's kind of a change in where we wanted to focus attention in that park, I would say.
Okay. Oh, and like I guess another one that came to mind is the Bank of Ann Arbor does a planting at the corner of Main and Depot. Is that right? And is that a park? That's considered a park, is it not?
Mhm.
Yeah. And so that's an arrangement that's been made with the Bank of Ann Arbor.
Yeah, so for quite a few of these projects, this is on a larger scale, but for smaller projects where neighbors or community members want to make improvements to their park, whether it's aesthetic things through plantings or whatnot, we actually have a program called Adopt a Park, and they work with residents like this to see how can kind of the desired outcome work out best. Well, there we go. Very nice. And we have as recently volunteered for us at a park. And through Adopt a Park, then we're able to kind of outline what actions make sense and are allowable and have the permission of the city. But we have relationships like that throughout the park system.
Thank you.
Yep.
Julie, did you raise your hand?
I did. Yeah. So thank you for coming and for recognizing. Like I think part of the biggest issue I have with this is, like, I've heard the word community organizing it many times, and it honestly seems like community organizing like 101 to involve the neighboring community prior to doing this. So so I would feel kind of remiss if I didn't point that out, and it might, I don't know, help a little to just recognize that. And then also there was, and I wanted to ask maybe staff, this is not the first effort at an edible forest that we have in the city and our park system. We do have one at Bureau Park that was done in conjunction with the wet meadow there in 2012. And has been in existence for a long time. And I didn't know if that was maybe a model to follow. I know then we didn't have like Sustaining Ann Arbor Together grants and other things, but they did, I'm assuming, work with the city to get permission, and there may be a model there. I know it makes me sound very old to be like in 2012, but in 2012 there was an edible forest that went in my ward in Ward 3 to Bureau Park at one of our, major facilities that has a lot of different activities going on there. So I do think there is precedent, but I do, and I know that, well, the neighbors are supportive, but I guess maybe just give you an opportunity to respond to the fact that, a lot of support has come from outside of the neighborhood. And then that's kind of my second question is how do you sort of intend to, if this does go forward, involve the neighbors so that the neighbors really do feel that they have an opportunity to participate, because one meeting is not going to cut it. Like, there's got to be community in the community garden,
Sure.
right, or forest.
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all,
kind of what are the next steps?
Councilmember Grand, it's
Julie. I get to be Julie here, which is great. So
okay, thank you, Julie. And
a little more informal here, at least I
appreciate like even learning how PAC works and what you all have on your plate. And I want to be clear that, to be fair, it is not an accurate representation that we did not engage the community. There are 2 households coming forward from Arrowwood who are complaining. That's what happened, at least in the public meeting. Many more people are coming forward who are in favor of this. And one of those 2 households, I had several explicit, direct conversations with, and they expressed support for the project, said that they could help us get supplies. This was the first that I heard of their unrest about it. And both of those households obviously knew exactly how to communicate with us. So, and when we talked about like, how do we get people to the public meeting, as this coalition, we offered to directly flyer all of Arrowwood and all of the neighboring subdivision that is on Duvarin and bring them into, if that would be helpful. But the protocol is to send out a postcard. And so that happened. So it is not an accurate representation that there's not enthusiasm for this project in Arrowwood, or that those people couldn't have expressed their concerns. earlier on and directly to us. And honestly, since, you know, one of them had suspicions or felt that this was not in order of operations with regard to how this should go about, when we reached out to Jeff and he came back to us with, you know, the statement that there was enthusiasm, this is not on him. It was absolutely our error and a misreading of that. But community organizing and liaising with city administration and or governance and the many branches that we have had to be in communication with now are distinct skill sets. Like this is a new experience, and it's very, I live here for 33 years. You know, it's very important to me to be in good standing with my neighbors and that they feel enthusiastic about it. So there's lots of different things that we intend to do to continue to bring people into the project. And this public survey was one of it. Like I said, we've had 55 responses. A huge percentage of those people are in Ward 1 or Arrowwood, and we have made many new connections through that survey with people that we didn't know before. So we felt like that was, you know, a good further step to say, like, how do we cast this net out to people who might not cross our path through this range of people who are already engaged in the coalition. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, I want to be clear, like we absolutely, oh, sorry, did you want to respond first?
Oh, no,
Julie?
I just want to say that's helpful. It's helpful to hear. And I think part of, as we make our, well, I don't vote on this commission, but, you know, as PAC makes the decision, just having a really intentional plan about how to move forward, like what that's going to look like. I think would be useful. I don't want to speak for the commission, but
yeah.
like from my perspective, it would be, and from the complaints, and I honestly have heard from more than like a couple people. So as a council member on this commission, so I just want to make sure that you know there is a plan there, and I think our grant structure actually helps with that.
Yeah, and we absolutely agree that one public meeting is not adequate public outreach. And in fact, a project like this relies on continual community engagement. And it's really important to us to structure that in a way that's as accessible as possible. You know, there are some people who can't make it to that kind of meeting. There are some people who can't make it into an online survey. And so we're really looking behind the scenes, not just through this approval process, but also going forward. If this project is approved, how can we be engaging people in the surrounding area in general, and Arrowwood in particular, who may not, you know, through various means, whether that's flyering, whether that's talking to people in person, whether that's online meetings. And that part of the process is very important to us and is something that is very baked in for us.
I mean, one of the best ways so far, honestly, were those first 3 work weekends, because lots of bikers came through who I wouldn't otherwise know, people who walk the parks regularly, elderly couples from the Dubaran subdivision, and they got to ask us questions and, you know, express their enthusiasm for the project genuinely and honestly, pretty much universally. So thank you.
And we appreciate, you know, we had some specific questions about aspects of the design in the survey, and we really appreciate that kind of community feedback, because like you're saying, there are people who have concerns, and it's important to us to be in communication with those people and clear about that, and clear about how we can be moving forward with this with the whole community in mind.
And people who have good ideas, you know, they have ideas and skill sets to bring. So yeah.
Yeah, intent is, I mean, I think no one's questioning the intent. Like the intent was clearly coming from a you know, a benevolent place. I think it's, you know, there are a lot of slippery slope issues here. And so we just want to make sure.
Sure. Yeah.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take a question from Jeff and then Rachel, and then let Colin make more comments. I do want to be cognizant of time. This has been a wonderful discussion, and I think Robin and Shanasi, you guys have provided a lot of great information, and but I do want to be aware of everyone's time.
Yeah, thanks. I'll just be real quick, because I think there's been some really good questions, and some of these things have kind of been answered somewhat when we had a little site walk through somewhere in this process. And my understanding was that at some point there'll have to be some kind of party, and somebody mentioned, I think Andy mentioned, will there be a nonprofit form to create this, to sign this memorandum of understanding with the city that this is the use of this park for this duration, or this part of the park for that duration. And so I think that's a question that has to be answered yet. And does that function through Adopt a Park or another branch of the city? Is it just an agreement with the parks? I know that I have encouraged them, and I want to play a part in it too. And some of our Arrowwood neighbors have offered to help me out. There's a city playground that's right next to, like, a little kids playground that's adjacent to this, and we want to kind of bring that into the fold. And so when we have these work sessions, we want to kind of adopt that. And I say we, don't want to speak out of a line for these folks, but I want us to adopt that along with some other Arrowwood people. So, I don't know if that needs to be official or not, but to roll that into the fold, if we're having a work weekend, we can have some people go over and pull some weeds and things like that to help out with this adjacent park, and and also for the kind of scrubby woodlands that are immediately south of this, that, if there's an opportunity to get in there with a weed wrench and do some guidance to those woodlands and yank all the invasives out and save naps some trouble or something like that. Like, it just seems like there's some good ideas there. But my understanding was that as part of this grant application, we had to come up with a 10-year plan. And so, that's pretty legit. And that has to be made and then followed, of course. And so that's important. Playground, woodlot, Etsy. Oh, I'm glad that they're going to add some seasonal vegetable beds to this, because I think that that's something that really helps with the education aspect. And I know we haven't talked about this notion that in the plan and in some of the things, there was this suggestion of a rainwater catchment that was going to be formed from a kind of a shed roof situation. And I'm not sure where that stands right now, because I know that construction of it requires my understanding was somewhere along the point it was determined by engineering that not city engineering but outside engineering, that to create the volume of water, catch the volume of water necessary, that it had to be a certain amount of square feet, which kicked it over to a larger structure than had been considered initially, and called for engineering drawings and so on, and stamped and sealed drawings. And so I reached out to some architects and stuff that I've worked with, and engineers that I work with, and to get a sense of what that would cost. And so I think there is a need for, a grant or some fundraising around this project if it moves forward to that level in the future, where there might be a shed roof in a structure or pavilion type thing. But I don't know where all that stands right now, because I've kind of stepped back as a city, and the park staff and Adopt a Park and the grant people have kind of taken over this process, but and rightly so. I just wanted to throw that out there, that these things are also part of the conversation, and that my understanding is there is going to be a 10-year plan drawn up to apply for this grant. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Rachel, let's get to your question.
Thank you, but I don't have a question. I have a comment. Is that all right?
Okay, the comment is great.
My comment is a recommendation, and that would be to consider amending your presentation or your work plan, whether it be for 1 year or 10 years or 400 years, that you have kind of it could just be a paragraph, but a termination understanding of a worst case scenario. Let's say every single person in your neighborhood moves away. The neighborhood becomes something that you don't recognize. Perhaps you're not well. You aren't able to take care of this garden. You've built up this 1/5 of an acre haven for the neighborhood, but it's fallen into disrepair. And unfortunately, the city parks department has received numerous complaints because it has fallen into disrepair. I'd recommend creating something at the end of your presentation that speaks to the what if of that. And this comes from real life experience. I used to be the vice chair for the City of Grand Rapids Parks Commission, and they had a very similar project. It started in the 90s with passion very similar to your groups and similar levels of experience. The woman who led it had 30 years of experience as a horticulturalist. And for about 10 years, that garden was the pride of the community. And then she got sick and she aged. And before she knew it, she looked up and all the people in her neighborhood were different and she didn't know them. And I was working for a nonprofit at the time. And I spent about 2 years working on community engagement as a professional organizer. And despite our attempts, we just could not get the initial level of passion back. And I think were you to come back to PAC again, let's say we needed further information or we were going to vote on something, I know that I would have some questions about that long-term what if. So it might be helpful to simply face that hopefully impossible possibility and address it head on.
Yeah.
And you might want to consider in your park design how many items you're putting in there that are permanent or that city staff couldn't work with or work around long term. So that if the worst did happen, what could you do with this space so that it's not unsightly?
Yeah, thank you for that. And it did already come up in our ongoing conversation with park maintenance and adopt a park as an important scenario to walk through, but it's a great idea to actually formally put it in the proposal. And that's really valuable feedback. So thanks, Rachel.
Thank you for hearing me.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Rachel. Colin, did you have any last comments or thoughts on this?
Yeah, I would simply add just to actually both to what Commissioners Skylas and Councilmember Hayner spoke about, depending how and if this moves forward, there will certainly be an agreement between the city and the group. We do this all the time. It varies on the complexity of the, I suppose, the project and as to what form the agreement would take. But I could certainly see it actually taking something like the agreement that we have with Project Grow. It speaks to some of these things which people wonder about what happens if it starts to go into disrepair and that. So it is something that we can actually reference over time, even if the players change. And then the last thing I was just going to say is in the packet that you received, there is the report from the Food Forest. It is quite extensive. I think it's maybe 10 or 12 pages long. If you haven't had a chance to read it yet, I'd suggest that you do. And if you guys have any questions on items in there or items that you start to think about after the meeting, if you want to collate questions, I can certainly get those out to staff and the appropriate people to answer them so that we could have them prepared for the next meeting at PAC.
That sounds great. Thank you, Colin. So Robin and Nancy, thank you again for joining us and answering all of our questions and also entertaining our comments. So
thank you all so much for your time.
Thanks for having us, and have a great rest of your meeting.
Great. Thank you. Item 6B, we have a presentation on the survey results for the Burns Park tennis court reconstruction. And I believe Adam is not able to join us. So Colin, you'll be presenting this.
We've actually got a last minute change. I'm going to hand off to Hillary, who is able to join us.
Great.
Adam is not feeling well today.
Okay. Hi, Hillary.
Hope he feels better.
All right, let me see if I can share my screen here. And okay, let's see. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see here. Okay, so today I'm just going to be giving you kind of an informational presentation on the survey results for the Burns Park tennis courts reconfiguration. And then again, this is informational. So then the next meeting in October, we'll be actually coming back with a resolution. And so these are just some existing images of the Burns Park courts. And then these are some images of the Leslie Park court pickleball courts. And so we've received a lot of feedback from the community that there's interest in pickleball court infrastructure. And so whenever we have a tennis court that comes up in need of renovation, we do want to ask the community if there's interest in making that, in adding pickleball infrastructure there. And so the Burns Park tennis courts are in need of repair. There's just some cracking and other resurfacing needs. And so as part of that, we actually sent out a survey to the public from late June to mid-July. And we presented 3 different options, basically, that people could vote on. And so we advertised the survey through all our usual social media networks, as well as sent mailers to any residents within a quarter mile. And so we actually received over 200 responses. There were 219 responses. So really surprising and great feedback. And so of the three options, you can probably see them a little bit on the screen here, but I'll walk through each one individually. The first option was really just to keep the existing court configuration, which is 4 tennis courts, as well as a small practice surface. So it's really just replacing the existing in kind. The second option was leaving 3 tennis courts as they are, and then for the 4th tennis court, just providing pickleball court striping as an overlay. So there'd be no permanent pickleball nets. You would have to bring portable nets. We had discussed possibly having those available for checkout at the senior center nearby. But this would, maintain the infrastructure of 4 tennis courts while also allowing for some pickleball use. And then the third option was actually removing one of the 4 tennis courts and adding 2 pickleball courts in its place. So those would be permanent pickleball courts with permanent nets and everything. And so the feedback we received from the survey was basically 80% of respondents were interested in some form of pickleball being included in the courts. So a combination of options B and C, but the overwhelming response was an interest in option C of actually removing one of the 4 tennis courts and adding the permanent pickleball courts. So this is what we'll be asking PAC to respond to a resolution on in October, but we would like to look at reconfiguring the courts based on this community feedback. So I don't know if anyone has any questions or comments.
Questions or comments for Hillary?
This would happen in the spring?
I'm not sure exactly on the timeline. Probably sometime next spring, summer, or fall. We haven't quite put out the bid documents for bid or anything yet. So once we know which direction we're moving in, then we would kind of look at the construction timeline, but it'd be sometime next season, I'd imagine.
Any other comments or questions? I know as PAC, we've received several emails about this in support of pickleball. So, Colin, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I would add simply when we did the last tennis court reconstruction, that was for Leslie, and the way that PAC worked on that was we presented you with options as we are doing here, and then we came back at the next meeting to have PAC actually pass a resolution as to the configuration of the court. So it is something that, certainly people feel strongly about, both pickleball players and also tennis players. Again, in your packet, there's the result of the survey as you see it here, but there are also a lot of comments. So if there's an opportunity to read those comments before the next meeting, I think they help to inform.
Great. All right, I don't see any other hands raised right now. So thanks, Hillary, for presenting, especially last minute. Moving on to item 7, reports. Item 7A, report from Parks and Recreation Manager. So Colin, when you're done having a sip of water, you're up. Oh, Colin, you're on mute.
I miss in person sometimes, I really do. Yeah, I do have quite a few updates today. I'll start with the recreation facilities as it relates to COVID. I did send an email out to the commission and also to council with just a little update on that. It was now kind of almost 2 weeks ago that the governor updated some executive orders on COVID, and it allowed for the reopening of ice rinks and swimming pools and gyms, but all with a lot of restrictions. So just to give you a quick overview as to what it means for our facilities, our ice arena at Veterans Ice Arena is not open yet. And the reasons for that are sort of a couple of different things. They are allowed to be open for the sole purpose of serving as a venue for organized sports. But Ann Arbor's emergency ordinance, which was passed a few weeks ago, limits how large of a gathering or group one is allowed to have inside to 10 people or less. And that does not work very well for hockey. So we are still kind of in a holding pattern to see when and if that changes. So if you're curious as to why there are a lot of ice arenas open, but we're not, that is kind of it in a nutshell. I will also add, though, that the emergency order that was updated, it allows for organized sports. At the same time, on the same day, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services released guidance saying that you should really avoid contact sports. So there's, as it seems like the longer this goes on, the more things seem to be in conflict with one another. But in short, the reason our ice arena is not open right now is because of the size restrictions for indoor use. The swimming pools are also allowed to open, but with restrictions. One of the main ones, we're only allowed to have one person per lane. So at the moment, we are not opening up the pool for MAC because we really couldn't have more than 6 people in it at any given time. And we have 3 main programs at that pool. One is a neighborhood swim team, the other is swim lessons, and also the master's swim group. Those things can't take place at this stage. So we're kind of continuing to wait to see if there will be kind of an ease on restrictions there so that the facility can be used properly. And we're still open outdoors at Fuller Pool. The last day will be the 20th. So we kind of extended the season there. So there have been swimmers there throughout the last week. And I think you know, but Argo and Gallup canoe liveries closed for the season. We had another couple of staff were positive for COVID, and it seemed at this stage, this is kind of the time of year when the liveries begin to slow down anyway. When considering that, in addition to the fact that a number of other employees need to be quarantined after we have somebody come in contact with it, it made sense to close down for the season there. And just a quick thing too, for volunteer events, those are starting to come back. Actually, NAP and Adopt a Park have really both done a nice job of realizing that there are ways to get small groups of people outside. In Ann Arbor, it's less than 25 people, can congregate outside. And there are stewardship opportunities across the parks in October for NAP, and September and October for Adopt a Park. So it is nice to see some things starting to come back a little bit. This last week, we began the construction project at Huron Hills, the wetland creation and the creek restoration that you guys have heard about over the years a number of times. So it's always exciting to see something starting. And we're excited with the crew and the direction of the project. I also wanted just to give an update. At the last meeting, PAC appointed a subcommittee for the renaming of Winchell Park, and we're going to be having our first subcommittee meeting on that on, I want to say, the 21st, coming up pretty soon. So at the next PAC meeting, we will have something to report on in regards to that. Some other news, which is good news, is after a long time, we received word from Eagle, or the state, that Leslie Science Nature Center, you will recall, had a lot of testing on arsenic in their soil and kind of the bioavailability of it. All of those tests have come back, and the site is going to be cleared for use again shortly. So Leslie Science Nature Center will be able to resume some programming there within, obviously now the COVID parameters, but it was really good news, and there will be a press release coming out later in the week with the details of it. But in a nutshell, the arsenic levels are not a concern, in short, for the type that they do. And I'm trying to think if I've got anything else right now. I wanted to highlight the fact that at Argo and Cobblestone, we're going to have the goats are going to be out working. For those of you who are not familiar with what I mean by the goats, we had them out a year ago doing landscaping. They started at Gallup Park. And it's really proven, of which there's a lot of at Argo and also Cobblestone. So I think we're going to let them loose there to do their thing. And that is everything I have at the moment.
Thanks, Colin. I'm excited about the goats, but even more excited about the news on Leslie. So thanks for sharing that with everyone. Does anyone have any comments or questions for Colin about his report? Julie.
I have talked to Colin about this. I know with some of the facilities and with the emergency order, council did make some exceptions. They made exceptions for schools, which is why we can have high school athletics. They made exceptions for religious organizations. So, you know, I frankly trust staff's judgment tremendously with this in terms of whether or not they believe it would be safe to open, because they've made good calls throughout the pandemic. So I just do want to put out there that I am open if I, you know, hear from folks on PAC that if we want to make parks facilities also exempt, I would be willing to bring that to council if we think that that direction needs to happen. And I'm not trying to tip my hand on the scale one way or another, just that we did exempt schools, we did exempt religious organizations. This really, the emergency order was much more about like party patrol than it was about like whether our ice arena should be treated differently than the one that happens to be like across the street in Pittsfield Township. So I don't know if anyone has feedback about that.
Yeah, I think I saw Steve's hand first and then Lauren.
Just a comment, Colin, with regard to the Cascades. I thought there was like a before and after when the city said, wait a minute, there's too much activity down here. And I thought it was really well handled. Just sort of my compliments. There was a lot of signage, good signage, and you could really see the results, the difference. I went there sort of the weekend after the decision was made to sort of stop and really discourage people from tubing. And there were still a lot of people out there using it. There was people fishing, a lot of people kayaking. There was a lot of bicyclists through there, but there wasn't the same kind of gathering around of crowds of people. So I thought it was well handled. The parks are still getting enjoyed by a wide swath of people, but I appreciated what the staff did there.
Thank you. I share that for sure.
Lauren.
Thanks. Sorry for speaking up too soon. I just wanted to clarify on Julie's comment. Would you solicit an opinion from staff as to whether or not they believe it to be sort of safe with regard to the current emergency orders and executive orders set by the governor and that kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, I think our staff has done a tremendous job on parks determining what has been safe and has been, you know, definitely always erring on the safer side. And so, you know, that's, I guess all and I would just like to hear feedback from all of you. Like, I personally would be very comfortable bringing that forward to council to look at an exception. If, you know, I think, Colin and I've talked about this, like it's we don't want to put you all in the position of saying like making a public health call. I think what Parks has been doing is they have great partners with the city, with the county, with the health department, and has been using those partners to make great decisions throughout the pandemic. And so I just don't want this to be I don't want us to go just say like, you absolutely must open. But I am wanting to hear feedback about, you know, does this group think we should be giving parks the option, and was this an unintended consequence of this emergency order, which really was about like fraternity basements and not about vets. Yeah.
Thanks.
Ruth, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that Colin and staff should feel free to talk to council members about tweaks, if there are tweaks that would make locations usable and seem to fit. Whether or not they make sense ultimately, that would have to be a discussion. And then the other thing I have to say is, I'm sorry, but I do need to leave at 5:30. So
okay.
I know there's still quorum.
Yeah.
And there's no chat, so I couldn't just tell people.
Thank you, Ruth.
Yeah, take care.
Thanks. Any other comments or questions? Right now, I mean, I will just say that I also, to second what Ruth said, I think I trust the park staff to make a judgment call on looking into whether it is prudent to reopen a specific facility like the ice rinks or not, based on safety and also budget and all the other factors that they've, the staff has taken into account throughout this entire pandemic. So.
Okay, no, I hear the direction, and staff can certainly put something together that I think can advance the question. I'd say kind of in a nutshell, in some ways, the rinks are easier potentially to manage than the liveries and the golf courses, in that at the rinks, especially when they're opened only for organized competition, you have a lot of customers that are going to be repeat customers. It's the same league every night at the same time, the same people in it. While for the liveries and for the golf courses, there's brand new people every day. So I think the idea of being able to teach behavior might actually be easier at the rinks. What's harder about it is it's indoors. But I think that we can certainly put something together that, if we feel is safe for users and safe for staff, then we'll bring that forward for consideration.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Seeing no other hands raised right now, we'll move on. Report from a Recreation Advisory Commission. We don't have a rec person at the moment, so we'll move past that. No other reports from relevant commissions, committees, boards, or task forces. So we'll move on to new business. And we do have quite a bit of new business today, which is exciting. The first item is a resolution to recommend approval of a contract with All Star Power Excavation LLC to renovate the pathway near the boat launch at Gallup Park. And Hillary, it looks like you're back to provide us more information about this.
I am, yes. I'm going to share my screen one more time with you. Let's see. All right. Okay, can everyone see my screen okay? Oops. Yeah, so we're looking to repave a section of the pathway in Gallup Park, basically between the Gallup livery on the west and then the Gallup boat launch on the east side. So the boat launch is that parking lot that kind of pulls off from Getty's Road. So I'll actually be looking at the entire asphalt pathway for that segment. The area is highlighted in red, so they'll also be connecting up to the corner of Fuller and Huron Parkway as well. And so the need for this path segment to be renovated is basically, it's just deteriorated over time. There's areas that show settling and some standing water. And then also some of the site furnishings along the way have kind of reached the end of their life as well. We'd also like to widen the path because there are some signs of cow paths on either sides. It's currently about 8 feet wide, and our new standard for heavily used non-motorized paths are 10 feet wide. So what we're looking to do is kind of follow the blueprint we did at Riverside Park when we redid that pathway a couple years ago. So we'll be widening the path from 8 feet to 10 feet to kind of conform to that standard. We'll be replacing site furnishings along there, so benches and picnic tables. And then we'll also be addressing some drainage issues that we have at Gallup. And so the city, we received 6 bids for the project. And the lowest bidder was All Star Power. So they were the lowest responsible bidder at $245,100,000. So we're recommending awarding them the contract, and the work is scheduled to begin in April of next year, and we're hoping to be complete before Memorial Day. So it'll be open to the public before the kind of high season use. So if anyone has any questions, please let me know.
Thank you, Hillary. Any questions or comments?
Well, I would move approval, Paige.
All right, great. We have a motion to approve the resolution from Steve. Is there a second? A second from Rachel?
Yes, please.
Yes, great. Okay. So motion for approval by Steve, second by Rachel. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Great. Resolution passes. Thank you.
Thanks.
Moving on to 8B, a resolution to recommend approval of a contract with Somerset Paving to replace basketball courts at Southeast Area Park and Leslie Park. And if you recall, Adam talked to us about this at our last meeting, but Hillary, do you have more information to add?
Yes. So again, this is just work we're doing as part of our ongoing capital improvements. We do look to renovate and repair game courts on a regular basis. So these 2 basketball courts were identified as being in need of repair. And we actually have to do a full replacement just because of the condition of the existing pavement. And so far we bid out contract documents. We received 2 bids, and Somerset Paving was the lowest bidder for $116,000. So we're hoping to do this work also in next spring as well. So we're recommending this contract with Somerset Paving.
Great. Any comments, questions, or a motion?
This is Lauren. I have moved to approve.
To approve. Okay. Seconded by Rachel. Moved by Lauren, seconded by Rachel. Jeff, did you have a question or comment though?
Just a quick question. The paving bid also includes the overpainting and when they're done?
You know, that's a great question.
Because I know we've talked about this mural.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, and maybe Colin can chime in. I think this is still an option that they're looking to talk to the neighborhood about. This was kind of that painting you're talking about.
Yep. So the contract before you includes the cost to paint the courts, I suppose, in their usual format, right?
Three color format kind of thing.
Right. Yep. Yep. But then we will have the opportunity, you know, to amend that part of the contract. We can always actually do a change order, and we can take that part of the work out if we were to proceed with one of the mural ideas that Adam spoke about at the last meeting, because then we would be buying the paint and actually painting the court, most likely in a volunteer effort type of thing for this. We would go back to the contractor and ask them to do the lines after we do the mural. So the approval of this contract does not interfere with the possibility of this still occurring.
I volunteer. I love painting floors.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean,
it's just so easy.
This is very much something that we would engage the neighborhood area in each location on, because even though it's the replacement of the same in the sense that it was a court to begin with, it's still a court. This needs to be something that has, you know, the community interests, neighborhood buy-in. We've had some really, really good luck actually doing projects like this. People really enjoy them, and it brings people together that aren't always together.
All right, so we do have a motion by Lauren and a second by Rachel. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor of the resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, resolution passes. Thank you. Item 8C is a resolution to recommend approval of a service contract with Aquatic Source LLC for on-call pool mechanical services at the city pools for an amount not to exceed $75,000 annually for fiscal year 21 to 23, with a 2-year renewal option not to exceed $75,000 annually for fiscal year 23 to 25. And Josh has joined us to talk about this.
Hello, everybody. In front of you is just a resolution for kind of the on-call of aquatic maintenance. Obviously, this year we didn't need to utilize this as much. The RFP actually went out in January in hopes that we would have a new on-call in May. With pools not opening up, we kind of delayed this. We had 3 bids come in, one of which was incomplete, which was from the group Northwest that we used last time. Aquatic Source and Baruzzi were the 2, and Aquatic Source, based on kind of the nature, the response time, the fact that there was not trip charges, and the fact that we've had past involvement with them were all reasons why we felt that they were the vendor to use. So we're looking for your approval on that recommendation for approval.
All right, thank you, Josh. Any questions or comments or a motion to approve? A motion by Mike. Excellent, thank you. And second by Ann. Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor of this resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Great. Resolution passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Item 8D is a resolution to recommend approval of a Michigan Department of Natural Resources Trust Fund grant development project agreement for the Argo Livery Universal Access and Site Improvements Project and accept an appropriate funding of $300,000. And Hillary is going to tell us about this.
Yeah, so you all might recall back in winter of 2019, you approved a resolution to allow us to apply for this grant. We did receive the grant and were successful. We did have to wait until the Michigan legislature formally appropriated the funds. So that just came in later this summer. So we'd like to formally basically accept those funds by this resolution. And because of the legislature delay, we had originally intended to start construction this fall, but now we're planning to delay it until next fall. We just don't have time right now to get it out to bid and get a contractor on board to start construction this year. So it will be delayed a year, but it's all still going to happen. And I think really it'll actually give us a little extra time to look at the design and see if there might be anything that we want to tweak based on COVID and kind of the ongoing situation that might influence the design going forward.
Great.
So I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Mike, do you have a question or is that a motion to approve?
This one's more of a comment, and it's based on comments that come from the Environmental Commission. Every meeting when the Huron River comes up, there is great interest in the opportunity for public information to get out around water quality improvements that we've made, and also fish advisories. So I've said it before, I'll say it again. That opportunity for public education as part of that design while people are waiting in line is very, very important to the environmental community, and will hopefully get included in there.
Great.
Thanks.
Yeah, definitely like to include some.
Great comment, Mike. Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I had just a quick question. Is there a deadline for spending the funds?
That was my question too. So thanks for taking that one.
Yeah, so I know they said that because of the delay they had in approving it, that we would have 2 full years. So we'll have plenty of time to complete the project within that time period.
Any other questions or comments or a motion to approve?
I'd move for approval.
All right, motion by Stephen,
Second.
seconded by Mike. All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, great, the motion passes. Thank you.
Thanks.
Item 9, commission proposed business. We have one resolution. 9A is a resolution to rename Rose White Park in honor of Braden Craypole. And I'm going to speak to this for just a moment. So many of us had the opportunity to know Braden either as a council member, a neighbor, a friend, or a PAC member. And at our meeting last month, one of his neighbors, Nancy, came to our PAC meeting to to present to us about the desire of the neighbors to rename Rose White Park in honor of Braden. I've been in touch with Braden's wife and daughter, and Braden's family is very appreciative and supportive of this idea. They would like it to be called Braden's Park and be signed that way as well. So this is just a resolution to rename Rose White Park in honor of Braden. So if there are any comments or questions, or a motion to approve. Stephen?
I just had a question actually, because I think there's like 2 non-contiguous parcels, and
Yes.
this renames the whole thing. Is that correct?
Yes, this would rename all of those little triangular parcels that are currently named Rose White Park. And I think it came up at the last meeting, but just to reiterate, Rose White Park, it's named that simply because of its location at the intersection of those streets. So this isn't taking away from some other individual. Any other comments or questions? Yeah, Jeff.
Is it currently signed? Is there a sign there now? So there's like a sign stand so we can just replace the cross piece of it or whatever when it gets, we can have a new cross piece made with the new park name, or is that something we have to budget for? We have, clearly we have that kind of money, right? I mean,
We are able to redo the park sign. That's actually work that we do in-house. So that is
okay. A sign shop does
not
that.
an issue.
Okay,
Right.
cool.
Yeah.
So just since that is the topic, the gentleman who called at the start of the thing, Ben, someone, I didn't catch his last name, but he was talking about that with the signage and all that. That's something that we could take up perhaps in business in the next meeting or something, that notion of looking at the signs and how they're on the maps and so on. Have we done an informal or formal signage survey of the parks?
We have, and we actually are working kind of through the process of replacing what I'll call the old park signs, which are the ones on the wood, which rot after a certain period of time. We replace a certain amount every year with recycled plastic that weathers really, really well and looks good and lasts, it seems to, for a long time. So there is kind of a process for replacing the aging park signage in place and moving. As for the addresses, there are some places where, depending what you look at, if it's on the city website or if it's on like a Google Maps, the addresses aren't always correct on non-city sites, is what I'll say. But we'll continue to look at that and certainly update them as we need to.
Mike.
Yeah, as I look at the Washtenaw County website, currently Rose White Park is actually 7 separate parcels along Stadium Boulevard. So while I appreciate the earlier presenter's request, that might be just more confusing to put 7 signs along Stadium for 7 different chunks of this little park.
Well,
So,
and we certainly have a lot of
that
parks
out as you go.
that, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we certainly have a lot of parks that have multiple entry points, so, you know.
Yeah, when
But,
we did our Leslie walkthrough for this food garden idea with Scott that day and the Adopt a Park people, we found the old Leslie wooden sign that was kind of
Yep.
in a woman's yard, basically. It was like, it was very hidden and gone away, really. So
I will say for this though, that there are funds that the neighbors have raised to actually make some improvements in the park too. So I don't know exactly what those plans are, but I think they'll be quite nice. So.
Any other comments or questions about this resolution or yeah, Julie?
I just want to say it was like an honor and a pleasure to work with some of the neighbors on this and with park staff and there's just overwhelming neighborhood support for this change. And I know I used to live in this neighborhood. It means a lot to the neighbors. So thank you to staff for pushing this forward. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for making that point. Any comments or questions or a motion to approve? Moved by Mike.
Move.
Great. We have a motion by Mike and second by Ann. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Great. Motion carries. Thank you. We will now move into land acquisition matters. Colin, I believe, do we need a motion to go into closed session?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Before we move to our LAC Zoom, is there a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Moved by Stephen. Second? Seconded by Mike. Great, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, so we can leave this Zoom, and if you check your email from Kristen, there is a link for our LAC Zoom. See you all in a minute. like everyone is successfully coming back. So we need a motion to return to open session. Moved by Rachel, seconded by Lauren. All in favor of moving back to open session, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great. Moving on to item 11, our second public comment section. Kristen, is there anyone on the phone for public comment?
Yes. Let's see. There is one caller. They have not indicated. Caller, if you would like to speak during this time, please press *9 to raise your hand. They do. All right, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Moving on to item 11, our second public comment section. Kristen, is there anyone on the phone for public comment? Yes.
Hello?
There is one caller. They have not indicated.
Hello.
Caller,
You have 3
if
minutes
you
to
would
speak.
like to speak during this time, please press *9 to raise your hand.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Hi, this is Greta Krapel at 1502 Golden Avenue. I just wanted to thank the committee and the Parks and Rec staff for considering renaming the park in my husband's memory. I speak on behalf of my daughter Grace and our entire family to tell you we're so honored and grateful. And with that backdrop, naming the park in his honor, I believe, would send a message that public service and community service is, hello?
Yes, you can keep going. We can hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
Public service is valued and important. And to synchronize with the comment in the beginning about the equity in our parks, naming the park after an ordinary neighbor with an extraordinary public service record sets a great example. So thank you for approving. Thank you for approving this proposal, and a special public thank you to my neighbors and community for honoring Graydon's memory in this way. I know there are more approvals needed, but regardless of the outcome, the time and effort it has taken to get the proposal to this level is emblematic of why Graydon loved Ann Arbor. And thank you so much and have a great night.
Thank you, Greta, for calling in. We appreciate it. Kristen, are there any other members of the public?
No other callers.
Okay, great. Then there are communications in your packet and we stand adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Hey, did anybody catch that caller's last name? That Ben, who called about the parks and the equity? I wrote down Ben and I couldn't hear his last name. I don't know if he said it or.
Yeah, it's Ratner.
Ratner?
Ratner.
Yeah.
Is that, there's been a woman who's been calling council who said she did a parks tour. Is that the same family, do you suppose, or?
No, it's not. That's not Shannon family. They also did it.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. That was the woman who spoke to the STR issue, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what, okay, so two different
Yeah.
people.
Like one's a family, one's a couple.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for clearing it up. It was a good idea, and I just, if I see an email from them, I'll know who it is, so.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense what he's saying about the signs and everything, and I'm glad to hear that we have a sign, a little sign survey underway, and that's good.
Great. All right. Bye, everyone.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right. Have a good night. Thank you.